Hi, I'm Kennedy, and so for my psychological impact area assignment, I chose my dad to basically walk him through and explain what those psychological impact areas were. And yeah, so the first one we have is personal, and that starts when you get diagnosed. And when you get diagnosed, a lot of people do something called a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's basically, do you know what that is?
No, I do not.
Basically, it's where someone given a positive or a negative belief inside their head, and they use their behaviors to almost enact it, and basically that expectation of what they thought to be true does come true, and therefore fulfilling this self-prophecy, which, in my opinion, it can definitely be changed if you change your ideology around mental illness and all that stuff. Then we have family. So, what are a few ways that psychology or mental illnesses and psychological things may impact family?
It can affect your marriage. It can affect how you are with your children. It can affect just family relations in general. It can affect how you are with other people.
Yes. Yes. The main one I wanted to really point out is in that we talked about in class a lot is custody. Well, obviously it affects marriages, which then trickles down and affects custody and all that stuff because who's competent enough to take the kid. And we watched so many videos on that, which led us down another rabbit hole of foster care. And foster care...
Is that when they find that neither parent can take a hold of or mentally competent enough to have a child?
Yes. But no, what we learned about in the foster care thing is how a lot of the kids get treated in the system, and that was a big part of what we talked about and stuff. And how they can get almost kind of diagnosed with all these things at such a young age, and how it really affects their mind. And it's almost there could have been different steps to take, and they didn't. And then now those kids are the way that they are.
Not because they go to different homes all the time, or it's just...
Well, yeah, I mean, there's obviously that, and then there's physical, psychological neglect, and sexual abuse, and all those things that play into it that are very common in foster care. But there's also where kids just have low key a little depression because obviously you get separated from your parents. That sucks.
Right.
But then sometimes it's they see that. And then I think also when DCS gets involved, there has to be a child psychologist involved because of it all. And sometimes they prescribe them these drugs. I remember them seeing there was a huge epidemic in especially the early 2000s where kids in foster care were getting pumped full of all these drugs because they were showing basically just normal kid things.
Mm-hmm.
Rebellion, sadness, just things that kids are experiencing for the first time, so obviously it's going to be a little prolonged.
Did they find that these drugs actually helping the kids, or were they just doing it just to basically say that they were just doing something for the kid instead of doing counseling and talking to the kid?
No. They found that basically it's really hurting the kids, and a lot of them have developed speech impediments and all this stuff, and tics and things like that because of how these antipsychotics were affecting their brain. Because I remember they were saying in the video they did a study, and it was one kid was 4 years old and had ADHD, or no, it was depression or something, which is crazy to me because I don't truly think you can diagnose a 4-year-old with depression. But yeah, it was hurting him, and then it takes effect on the brain really, really harshly. Then, also going into legal, we have all the DCS stuff, which I'm sure you know, where kids can get taken away. And then, I talked about foster care, and that can also go into legally, incompetence versus insanity, which is another big thing we talked about.
What's the difference between the two?
So basically, insanity is when you're not of sound body and mind when you're committing the crime, and incompetence is basically where like you couldn't differentiate right from wrong, and within that.
And either one of them, can you like black out and just do something and stuff without thinking about it and stuff, or?
I don't know, because I've never really experienced either one of them, but I would genuinely think it's insanity, because that's also where I've heard a lot of people, like, you can get out of, like, say you murdered someone, you can get out of it, but you're probably going to be locked up for the rest of your life. While incompetence, like, you can get out of it, but I think you might walk. I think that's the difference. Gotcha. And then going into that is pain and where you can sue for pain and suffering and all that stuff. And a type of pain and suffering is loss of consortium, which, so I went back and looked at it, and basically, like, the gist of it is where someone, like a family member or spouse who's been, like, personally affected by this said family member, an individual, can sue, not you, but I think mainly the courts. Like, say, like, they're incompetent enough, so obviously I can't sue them, but I can sue you. And I think the fine is up, like, you can sue the court for up to $750,000, if I'm not mistaken. And that also goes into when you're...
So it's not really suing the court, that's suing the federal, suing the state and federal, who's getting the money, because the court obviously would not have the money and stuff like that, but the state or federal government would.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. Then that leads us into when you're not competent enough and say you do get off, you can't work because no place is going to take you because you're kind of loco. And then that's where SSI comes in, supplementary security income, where you can basically say to the government, I'm crazy and I can't work, so give me money. And then they do, and it's actually quite substantial. I mean, from what I hear. I don't know. And yeah, that's kind of...
You have to provide a lot of paperwork and stuff to show that you...
Yeah, apparently it's a lot of paperwork. You have to prove it, and I think you also have to see a psychologist as well, so that the psychologist can also be like, hey, yeah, they're crazy. And then it's a whole ordeal, but it is very possible. And then one of the last columns that we talked about was educational. And then educational goes into where a lot of mental illnesses, well, not mental illnesses, but mental disorders can go to special education and things like that. And also an IEP, which isn't necessarily for people who have terrible times learning. It's for just an individualized learning plan where basically they can get a little help. And with that comes a different curriculum. And the DAEP, the Developmentally Educationally Appropriate Practice, which basically, like, I think I was telling my dad earlier, like, you can't give a kindergartner 8th grade literature because they're just not going to understand it. But then again, you also have people with, like, IEPs who can understand that things, but also just need it at a different pace. Yes. And then for social, the very, very last column that we have is psychology language. And by that I mean, like, there's a lot of language you can use within psychology, and I think going over everything that we have, it has helped me look into basically, like, how to use more therapy words, I think, as he put it. Oh yes, and I don't know if we went back over the DSM-5. Do you know what that is?
No, I don't remember.
So it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of disorders. And basically, what it is, it's like basically this book, and you can, well, not you can, it has almost every disorder ever listed in it that's up to date, because it's called DSM-5 because there's been four other ones.
Do you know how long they've been doing this?
I think since like the 1950s, I'm pretty sure. Is when they published the first one. And they update it every few decades or years. And yeah, it just has basically every mental disorder that there is up to date. And yeah, and in it is basically all of the symptoms within a disorder. And
do you know who studies these things and stuff to add these new disorders into the book?
My best guess would be like federal. Well, obviously you have to have psychologists and people study it, and then you have to talk to the federal government, because like you can't go diagnosing people and just say, hey, you have this. But no, it's the Board of Psychology. Yes, I remember us talking about this. It's the Board of Psychology, like over the entire United States. It's the people that decide this. And like every time they get together, the board, and they go over all of them, and they're like, is this still a disorder or not? And then when they do, they can put it in the book, and then they put all of the symptoms that go with it. And then, yeah, that's how a lot of psychologists and therapy diagnose people based off of it. If you have, I can't remember, but it was like if you have so many symptoms of the said disorder, then you're qualified to have it.
How often do they meet as a board?
I mean, my best educated guess would be pretty often, but like for all I know is for the DSM-5, it's like not very often. Like it's, I think it's almost like every 5 years, every decade, something like that. Because I remember when the DSM-4 came out, and that I can remember that, so it wasn't like a millennia ago, you know.
Gotcha.
But yeah. Anyways, that's my TED Talk.